Thanks for everyone who's attending today. We've got a webinar about the new cyber insurance requirements that we're starting to see out in the field. We've got Edward from Spectra. He's the CEO over there. I'm Aaron Gergel. I'm with Watchdog Cyber. I'm the co-founder and CISO here. So yeah, we're gonna get started. Ed, do you want to give you an introduction?
Yeah, I can do a quick intro. Edward van Averstein, I'm the founder CEO at Spectra. 25 years in insurance, 10 increasingly focusing on anything cyber insurance and security. And started Spectra 4 years ago when I became convinced that the channel and managed service providers were the piece of the puzzle that insurers were missing when trying to validate security controls and effectively confidently price and deliver cyber insurance in a way that is less cumbersome and complex than what they are currently doing. So that was Spectra, effectively partnering with best-in-class MSPs, certifying their people, tools, and processes, and letting insurers and brokers on the other side know what MSPs were certified and which were not. And there's a bunch of great things that come on the back of that, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. I think we should probably talk about the problems and the trends, and then we'll talk a bit more about what we do at the end.
Sure. Yeah, so this will be a quick agenda for today's webinar. So we'll talk about why cyber insurance is no longer a checkbox, why SMBs are the target, the insurer as the regulator, what underwriters expect, and how this shows up in various industries. And then we'll open the floor to Q&A. The Q&A and the chat is open, so feel free to drop any questions throughout the webinar, or drop any comments in chat, and we'll do our best to answer them along the way.
That's great. So I'll start on the first few slides. So cyber insurance is becoming increasingly involved in cybersecurity. The reason for that is cyber insurance is a very, very new vertical within the insurance industry. It's 15 years old or so, and they've discovered that security was a non-negotiable piece of what an applicant need to present in order to obtain insurance. So they're moving from those questionnaires and do you have MFA, yes or no, and do you have a backup, yes or no, to much more advanced questions. And insurers are increasingly asking for evidence of security controls, which is not easy to obtain from where they stand and through a broker. So that self-attestation is problematic because they're asking their applicants, do you have that type of MFA and do you encrypt your backup? And more often than not, the customer, the insurance applicant, doesn't know. They say yes, and they hope for the best. So until something happens, and then the insurers discover that the backups were not encrypted and MFA was not deployed fully, and then there's always a risk that the insurer starts contesting the claim because things were not as presented to them. But what's happening because of that is the insurer are effectively the one deciding whether security was in place or not, currently after the fact. Which obviously doesn't help anyone. So that's evolving. You'll see in the next few slides. We can jump onto the next slide. That as attackers, are using increasingly sophisticated solutions to, compromise, access, steal information or money from businesses. This is, insurers discover those things when the claims surface and effectively find themselves asking for security to prevent those things happening in the first place. And the idea that small and medium-sized businesses are less exposed than big businesses is a common misunderstanding of what attackers do. They much rather, compromise 10 small businesses and get paid 7 times out of 10 if they figure it out, than attacking a bigger one that might give them more trouble. And what you're seeing is a lot of attack with smaller businesses, and certainly you see it on the little quote on the side. Allianz is one of the largest insurer in the world, and their incident response partners spend a ton of their time working with small businesses who often don't have insurance, and yet are very much a preferred target for bad actors. And I'll say one thing just to touch on AI. It's just making the job of the bad guys easier, whether it's vulnerability findings or just developing solutions to effectively execute on an attack and successfully compromise and ransom or effectively trick a customer into transferring money to the wrong place. So all this is happening. AI is making it worse, and SMBs who service small businesses are a target as well as their small business customers, and this is just getting worse. That's with AI. So jumping onto the next one. This is just to very quickly fly over how insurers have evolved. And how they're becoming that de facto regulator I've talked to you about. Pre-COVID, there was just very little, if any, requirements. You wanted cyber insurance, you just had to say how many employees you had, how much revenue, which vertical you were in. Very light touch, very cheap, and you had some form of coverage. Then COVID happened, and insurers said, "Oh, we need backups." And then they realized that backups often were not, offline, encrypted, or tested, and they became compromised alongside production environment. Then that's the MFA. It's got to be the answer. And then they discovered that MFA was not fully deployed because there was always someone who didn't want to use MFA because it was annoying. They didn't remember their passwords. So deployment of MFA was not complete within the customer's environment. Then EDR was the answer. And then quickly they realized small businesses don't do 24/7 monitoring of their endpoints. They say it has to be MDR. It has to be managed. You see how quickly the insurers are moving closer to MSPs here, because you're very much leaving the world of the applicant and you're approaching what MSPs do day in, day out, with MSSPs maybe. And then with 2025, the fact that they realize they just can't enforce 24/7, they can't verify MFA, they're pushing for a zero trust security model, advanced network segmentation, security. And you're seeing something which is a threat for MSPs when insurers realize that all this has to be in place for an for a policyholder to be safe. Let's just do it ourselves. So what you have is insurers who are effectively taking security in their own hands and offering, alongside their insurance policy, a full security service bundle, which, we have MSPs who call us regularly and say, "Hey, such and such insurance company is threatening to take away our customers because they say the customer can only get insurance if they use the insurance company 24/7 SOC endpoint solution." So that's happening. You see insurers, many insurers taking security in their own hands and sometimes co-managing or even displacing fully the MSP. So that's a trend that's happening. They're not very successful at it, but they're trying. Can on jump on the next one, Aaron, please. Then we have I have 2 slides just to show, what that means in I think I've got healthcare and maybe manufacturing is the next slide, but just to see what is happening, what insurers see, and what they want in place. And they're increasingly having the policyholder, so your customer, sign that those things are in place. So what you have is an increasingly long and complex list of security requirements, and it's good that Zach just joined because that's the world he lives in. And maybe I'll let him talk through the next slide, but effectively, and I'll introduce Zach briefly. Zach is one of our strategic insurance partners. They very much buy into the fact that the better way for insurers and to access security data and verify controls is through MSPs, rather than leaving that to small and medium-sized businesses to do themselves. And so Zach is very much sees every day as running a cyber insurance team at Ledgebrook, a US insurance platform. Very much is very familiar with what insurers see and what they request is in place in order to deliver comprehensive coverage that pays when the customer has an incident or a breach. Zach, do you want to add anything since you just joined? I was going to leave those to you, but you want to add anything to that slide and the next one?
Yeah, sorry I'm late, everyone. In terms of, especially as it pertains to healthcare, I think what we're looking for is ensuring that you have some idea of the digital real estate and not only the systems, but also the information that any sort of healthcare organization collects or is maintaining. Healthcare continues to be one of the highest targeted industries. Each record is worth a good chunk of change on the dark web. So as we continue to examine the types of companies that are looking for cyber insurance, MFA is absolutely a must-have. EDR and MDR, depending on the size of the organization, is absolutely critical. So we're examining not just how are you prepared left of boom in terms of a cyber breach, but how are you able to get back up and running? So having segmented backups and robust backup testing and planning is absolutely critical. So it's not just what you're doing to protect yourself so that a threat doesn't happen, but if something does happen, how quickly can you get back up and running? Because as we all know, healthcare companies do lose a good amount of money for every hour that they're down.
Again, kind of repeating myself here, but very quickly, when the insurer asks, do you have MFA, they really want to know that it's enforced and for every user account, that it probably must be phishing resistant. So no SMS involved. Do you have EDR? Sure, but is it deployed on 100% of endpoints? Is it really managed 24/7? Is the SOC, equipped to respond 24/7, every day of the year, or is this really a 2-man shop? Are our backups isolated, secure, tested, encrypted? Because they've discovered that when those things are not in place, often that means the backup is not available, and customer gets ransomware because the criminal find a way in. So you really have to be on the ball and check, and that's the job of the MSP. So jumping onto the next slide, Aaron, please. So that was kind of an introduction to why customers of MSPs should pay attention. I'll summarize quickly. They are the target. Of course, the big guys are targeted too, but the small businesses are very much targeted. It's a lot harder to hide with AI identifying vulnerabilities, open ports, and there is nowhere, say, oh, I sell shingles, I sell shovels, and no one cares about me. I've got 20 employees, I've got 2 million in revenue. Well, guess what? You could lose your business under the wrong, and it's easier to find the unprepared businesses. And AI will also help, attackers execute on once they identify the vulnerability and then ransom the customer or again steal his money. So all this to say that given the complexity and how fast things are moving, their security is typically best served by an MSP. Now, the reason why Spectra exists is because not all MSPs do the same work or quality of work. We've talked to hundreds of MSPs in the last 3 or 4 years. What we've discovered is about 20 to 30% of MSPs can get certified. Or certification follows, CIS controls. It's nothing all that creative. It's relevant to insurers who are increasingly dictating what needs to be in place for someone to be insurable. Small businesses are exposed. Not all MSPs are good and fit for purpose when discussing security and delivering security to small businesses. And Spectra was not a broker, is not an insurer, is certainly not a security company. We're there to identify and certify MSPs that small businesses can trust for their own security, and where cyber insurance becomes something that becomes discussed, we can connect those customers and their MSPs to our broker partners and insurers for a better experience, better price, better coverage that will ultimately deliver what we believe is optimized cyber resilience. Zach, do you want to add something in conclusion before we open up for Q&A?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add is how can a MSP help separate their clients from the rest of the pack? We, as insurance companies, we see a lot of companies applying for insurance, and quite frankly, applications are one piece of the puzzle. In fact, a lot of the times we've discovered that sometimes the information that's been filled out on the application is not completely accurate. And so partnering with your clients to help craft a story and help create a narrative that supports their efforts in staying secure is extremely helpful. And one of the best ways to do that is to have verified evidence. And that verified evidence is something that we get through the Spectra program. It's one of the reasons why we've chosen to partner with Spectra, because we have full confidence that the information that we're receiving from Spectra is exactly representative of the security posture of a client. And so there's a ton of value there for us, and it yields savings for your clients from a cyber insurance perspective, but also helps you bring in more stakeholders like a CFO or a director of finance, the folks that typically handle the insurance and rubber stamp the security spend expenses, which hopefully helps you fight for more budget, right? And helps you have more of those solutions that keep your clients more secure while increasing your top line as well.
Ed, you had mentioned that small business is still the biggest target, right? I think you said 7 out of 10 attacks are still against a small business, and obviously there's this misconception that just because they're small doesn't mean that they have to worry. Where do you think that misconception actually is bred from? Is it just that the small business community doesn't talk about it? They're embarrassed about it? Like, where do you think that stems from?
I'll start, and Zach's going to have some thoughts too. I think small businesses are often fighting bigger fires, and it's hard to get their attention to talk about something as unexciting, no disrespect to the folks on the phone, that cybersecurity or cyber insurance. It's not the first thing you want to talk about when you're a manufacturer, when you're a vet clinic, when you're, unless the regulator makes you buy insurance. And then everything becomes a requirement. But most people do this because they believe it's the right thing. And lots of small businesses do not buy cyber insurance, and many of them are, what we would describe as being under the cyber poverty line, where they're just not equipped to defend themselves from the most basic attacks. So too busy, just don't know, your lack of education. So a lot of education on our side. I'm sure you, Aaron, and MSPs on the call spend time educating customers all the time as to maybe they shouldn't deploy 6 different AI solutions without most basic, security controls in-house. So it's difficult to get a small business to focus and study and listen as to why they could lose what they spent 20 years building, could be gone, in the bad fund transfer fraud or a bad ransomware event or data breach. That is fairly common. It doesn't end up in the news because nobody cares. But if you're the CEO of that company, the owner, it's a very brutal day. And AI is going to make it worse, just like COVID made it worse. With people remote work, attacks your face exploding, AI is just doing it again in a different way. So there's no escaping, no hoping, no hiding. Anyway, Zach, you want to add some?
Yeah, for a small mid-sized business, I think it's not uncommon to think you're not a target. And there's always the argument of, well, they have bigger fish to fry, right? But the truth of the matter is that small businesses support the cybercrime economy way more than large organizations. These cybercrime gangs and organizations are efficient. Why would you spend hours and hours and hours trying to get $1 million from one client or from one target when you could send one email and get $1 million from 50 different companies and potentially even more? So this is not meant to scare small and mid-sized businesses, but this is just to help them understand what the reality is from a threat actor and adversary perspective. They like the easy button, just like a small business likes the easy button. We all appreciate making our own lives easier. That's one of the reasons why we've quickly gravitated towards AI for many tasks and large language models. And they have too. And so if they can cast a wide net and try to capture as much income from easy targets as possible, they're going to do it. So they're not all too dissimilar from a operationalized business. They figured out that it's easier to get a bunch of small fish in a big pond than trying to go whale hunting. And that's just the reality of the situation. So it's not that you're completely impervious from being a target. The fact is that you're a more desirable target than the big whale of like a Target or Home Depot or a Fortune 500 company. And you wouldn't immediately know that being a small business. And so that's why we're here. That's why Aaron's here. That's why Edward's here. We're here to help you understand this is how threat actors think. And the reality is that you're more attractive to them than a large company.
Now, guys, we are still seeing in our talks with customers and prospects and what have you. We're still seeing a lot of cyber riders on like a general liability policy. Are those worth the paper they're written on?
That's for you, Zach.
On paper, they look good, but unfortunately, the reality is that they provide a false sense of security. Typically, what you will see is they provide a very small grant of like $25,000 to $50,000. If you're lucky, maybe up to $250,000 in coverage. But when you start reading the fine print, which I don't know how many people on here are lawyers, it's not always the most enjoyable use of your time, I would imagine. Unfortunately, I'm a nerd about this stuff, so I love reading reading this kind of language. But it is not a robust form. And for small businesses in particular, the biggest threat is not getting breached in the same way that a large company would be. It typically is a lot more social as a result. So what does it look like for a small mid-sized business? It's funds transfer fraud. It's someone pretending or purporting to be a familiar entity. Like maybe they set up an email address that looks dangerously similar to an email address that is for someone in your organization. Or maybe they have managed to compromise because you didn't have an MFA solution in place. Maybe they did manage to compromise credentials for somebody within your organization. And so as a result, those riders that you get on your GL policy or maybe some other type of policy, they are not meant to respond to the types of attacks that a small business actually should be worried about, which is fraudulent transfer of funds, social engineering, someone pretending to be a familiar entity, telling you, hey, transfer these funds for this invoice, or maybe they're creating a sense of urgency by saying, pay this invoice now or else your service is going to be canceled in 48 hours, right? That's the kind of thing that small and mid-sized businesses see. And the data shows they are more susceptible to falling for, right? And then as a near second, it's the business email compromise. So if you don't have a secure email solution in place, like a secure email gateway, which basically filters emails, and then on the back end, that can turn into a potential breach. That coverage is not covering those types of scenarios, right? So you're essentially buying something that you don't need or is not effective for your situation as a small business. And only a standalone, what's called a monoline cyber insurance policy, something that gives you good limits, that is dedicated to responding to these types of events, is going to protect you in that scenario.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's always a tough one for us to help explain to folks of why it's important to have a standalone policy rather than just a rider. Talking with another insurance person, they had mentioned even with a rider, if you ever made a claim against it, right, it's actually a claim against your general liability policy, which jacks up your GL pretty heavily. So.
Yeah, and for a lot of organizations, that's probably the most expensive cyber or most expensive policy that you're paying for is your general liability, especially if you're a contractor or maybe you're in like the HAB or hospitality business. Chances are that GL policy is already expensive as it is. I don't know why you would want to take a chance and make it even more expensive.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just double checking chat and the Q&A. I don't see any others at the moment. You guys have any closing remarks you want to give?
Go ahead, Edward.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've summarized it earlier. Small businesses are exposed. They need, first and foremost, they need an MSP. Then they need a good MSP. So if you're a small SaaS or tech business, maybe you can pick your own MSP and know what you're doing. 99% of small businesses will not know what is a good MSP. We're here to help. We check the fundamentals. We will soon have some AI specific requirements in our certifications, because we find out that MSPs are where businesses go to get help with AI deployment. So we think this is part of everyday life for increasingly for small businesses as well. And insurability is going to come under the microscope. And for those who care again about resilience, and we have brokers and partners, brokers and insurance partners, like the ICAT Ledgebrook, who recognize that that's the path to doing things right. Good MSPs with great tools, people, and processes, which with a third party in the middle verifying that things are done following best practices. And Watchdog's gone through that successfully, and we're excited to work with them. So I'm here to answer questions. You can reach out to me directly or through Aaron, through our website, spectracyber.com, anytime. Zach?
Yeah, I think leaving things off it would be, whether you're an MSP or you're a small mid-sized business, it's important to recognize that as a small business, your most important asset is your relationship with your clients. It's what's going to support your book of business through time. Now, I want you to think about what it would be like to have to tell these folks that you've created these relationships with that you lost their data, that you can't deliver a solution that you said you were going to deliver for them. Maybe you're a manufacturer. You were not able to create the product that you said that you were going to create as a result of a cyber breach. That's enough to create some rifts in a relationship. And while at the end of the day, I'm sure they would love to support you, at the end of the day, a business has a job to do. And a cyber insurance policy, as well as sound cybersecurity, is two sides of the same coin. It's not one or the other. It's both. It's risk transfer and risk mitigation. So my biggest piece of advice is invest in security. There is a return on that investment, whether that's implicit or explicit. We try to make it as explicit as possible through our partnership with Spectra in providing savings by having attested and verified cybersecurity controls in place. But at the end of the day, what all of us want here is for you to not have to look at your closest or biggest customers in their face and say, I'm sorry, but we got breached and I lost your data. I mean, I could not even imagine what that would mean for me to have to look at potentially even my best friend and say, hey, these cyber threat actors know something about you that they shouldn't, right? So that's where I'll leave it off, and hopefully that's not too somber, but there is a better way to do all this. It's working with Watchdog, it's working with Spectra, and hopefully you'll see the Ledgebrook name on your cyber insurance policy, knowing that you will have saved money thanks to your Spectra certification and your investment in cybersecurity.
Yeah, and I'll say, for us being partnered with Spectra at this point, we've had some really good experience with being able to provide those insurance savings to a few of our customers. We've gone through the process of certifying with Spectra. Spectra's basically, they've checked our homework. We've checked all the boxes and we've made the list to be considered a good MSSP or MSP in their eyes, which we pride ourselves on very much. We like to think we do things a little bit different here. And again, we've got an independent verification of that. What that looks like for some of our customers, we've got a manufacturing firm right now that we're working with that they're scheduled to save somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000 a year in their insurance premium because of the services that we're doing and our partnership with Spectra. So if you're interested in having those types of conversations, we'd love to have them. We'd love to make that introduction to the folks at Ledgebrook and Spectra and to see if we can't help you guys save some money and secure your environments. I want to thank everybody for their time today. I know it's not always easy to give up 45 minutes of your day. We appreciate you attending, and we will see you all very soon.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Aaron. Bye-bye.